Hello and welcome to Chatting with Interesting People. As usual, I'm Steve and we've got a very exciting interview today. This is Elliott. Hello, Elliott.
Everyone.
Unlike lots of the previous interviews, I haven't actually met Elliott before. So I've kind of spoken to him a bit and you'll find out more about it as we go along. So first of all, Elliott lives just outside London, and you were working as a medic for a long time, weren't you?
I was working as an emergency medical technician, teaching first aid, defibrillators, stuff like that, and also doing a lot of medical event cover work at things like rock concerts, big sports events, things like that. And although not specifically London Air Ambulance, some of my patients did need picking up off the ground by the air ambulance and flying off to hospital. And the air ambulance that picked them up saved their life.
And that's a little sneak peek into what we're going to be talking about later.
Indeed.
That's quite interesting about the events and things, because I used to work in security at tons of concerts and events, so it's entirely possible that we've crossed paths at some point.
Oh, quite possibly. I've done a lot of BMX track events. International beach volleyball, terrible event. Awful, hated being on the beach and all that sunshine. 45,000 crowd rock concerts, VIP weddings, all sorts of things. But when you do that kind of stuff, you're very aware that your next patient might actually need to be stuffed in a helicopter and whisked off to hospital as fast as possible to save their life.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we're both very passionate about is making sure that people are aware of how to do some first aid and having all that medical training and things. So
I mean, it was a while back, but the BBC did a big study into it, and it was quite a few years back, so there'll be a lot more now. But back then they announced that 150,000 people a year die because they're not put in the recovery position, which is ridiculous. That's just
and that's
absolutely mad.
Such a simple thing to do as well, even if it's not perfect, just rolling people pretty much on their front so that they can breathe easier. And
so they don't
also things like CPR and resuscitation is that it's so easy these days, isn't it? A lot of people used to be they don't want to do it because of the mouth to mouth bit.
Pocket masks though, dead easy.
But that even these days that's not even taught as part of it, is it? It's the chest compressions is far more important.
Well, because you need to build up pressure within the chest for blood to start moving around and everything else. But even perfect CPR done by experts in it and everything else is only going to be about 30% as efficient as doing it, the body doing it. So it's not, CPR is not going to be a solution to everything. And
but it's the best opportunity that people get if they're in that situation, isn't it?
The person's dead. So, anything we do is going to be better than dead. But it's not like Holby City and casualty where the person, leaps up after 5 goes at compression and hugs them and says, "Oh, thank you for saving my life." Sadly, it's not that realistic. That's not realistic.
But doing that while somebody's getting a defibrillator or waiting for the paramedics and things, then that's I
mean, even if the physician response car from London Air Ambulance gets there with all their knowledge and all their drugs and all their equipment, if somebody doesn't do CPR, they're just going to arrive to go, they're dead. And that's it.
It's something like 3 minutes, isn't it? That
3 to 5.
The key time to really get really get
3
on
to
with
5
it.
minutes to get CPR underway, and about 15 minutes to get a defibrillator beside them.
Yeah.
Which is why it changed after the research, that calling for help was so much earlier in the process than it had been historically in the past. Was told we need to get the defibrillator and we need to get it there really quickly.
Yeah, I had been booked in for a defibrillator training at one point, but then a situation at work meant that I wasn't able to go. But in a first aid course following that, they got a defibrillator and said, we're not officially kind of training you on it, but here's a defibrillator. What do you think you do? And so somebody opened it, pressed the button, and it talks you through it. So
exactly, it's 100%.
Yeah, it's so vital and so easy in some ways. If anybody doesn't know how to do first aid or anything like that, then
they need to get training.
And
because you never know who it's going to be.
And it kind of emergency first aid can be just a half-day course, can't it? I think. So.
Oh yeah, it's worth getting. Always worth doing. I trained a girl guide who was 9, 10, I think, thereabouts. And I took extra time to teach CPR because she was struggling a little bit. And a month later, her nan dropped with a heart attack at the family Christmas party. And all the adults were running around like headless chickens. Oh no, Nana's had a heart attack. And she walked forward and was like, Auntie Jane, call an ambulance. Uncle John, go and wait outside so the ambulance knows where to come from. You need to stand by the road and keep looking in both directions. And she saved her nan's life. And if 9, 10-year-old can do it, why can't everyone?
Yeah, well, someone close to me recently, they've been kind of in the medical kind of line for a long time, many years, and just kind of at a supermarket they had to do CPR, and they were the only one that seemed to know what to do with it, and following that, the 2 young children asked kind of how to do it, so they gave they've now trained a couple of small children. So my first time doing first aid was when I was a child, and I was probably kind of 9, 10, something like that, and I learned how to do very basic first aid, but it then built on the knowledge that year after year I've kind of done lots of courses, and ended up with me being a very active first aider at one of the places I was working, always kind of responding to incidents.
I did medical cover in Oxford for a folk festival, and the sweetest little 7-year-old that was the daughter of one of the organisers, her ambition was to be a paramedic, and she turned around and begged her dad, could I stay with the paramedics and spend the day with them? And being 7 years old, may I, can I? And her dad said, do you mind? And I'm like, no, not a problem at all. So I gave her my high vis to wear, which looked like a dress on her. And she followed me around, which was, and everything else. Brilliantly well behaved. I mean, got to be honest, she's incredibly well behaved and wasn't a nuisance or anything like that. And we got back to the room we were using as a first aid post, and she wanted to learn something. So, okay, I'll teach a recovery position, something I can teach very quickly. Or countless times, taught it all to her. And then her mum, her dad, and her older sister, who was 10, 11, came to pick her up. And within 10 minutes, she taught mum, dad, and the older sister how to do the recovery position.
Amazing.
I was like, how, that just proves the point, that a 7-year-old. And I've taught adults with learning difficulties and first aid and all sorts. If somebody's laying on the floor, if you don't do something, they're dead. So whatever you do might be better than dead.
Yeah.
If you do nothing, they're dead.
Yeah.
So, I'm a massive, massive fan of teaching kids and everyone possible first aid.
Mm.
And it's like, I'm an amputee with a wheelchair and everything else. But if I needed to, I would get myself out the wheelchair and I go down on the ground and I do whatever I had to do, even though I'm now an amputee.
Yeah, and I've thought about it a few times, and I know that if I had to do CPR, I would be, I would do it. I would be able to do it, not for very long, but I would do that, even though I know that would, cause me incredible pain, incredible fatigue, and I'd be in a horrible position for probably a week or so afterwards. But at least
somebody doesn't die.
Yeah, it could make that difference for that person.
Yes.
So okay, so we've kind of talked a little bit about kind of first aid and things like that. Should we kind of come to part of this point? Yeah, you've just mentioned about being an amputee, so let's go to 2010, winter of 2010. It was a really horrible winter, wasn't it? What happened there?
Where I live in Chesham, it's almost the way the valley shape is and everything else. Chesham's almost like it's in a bowl shape. And when it snows, the snow stays forever because it's a bowl shape. And the then mayor, Jane Bramwell, was starting a new team of volunteers to help out in snow emergencies. And because being ex-search and rescue and done the event cover stuff and everything else, what it said to me is she'd take me out for coffee and a cake and pick my brains for ideas. So that was what we were going to do. And I walked up Lowndes Avenue, which is a steep road just off where I lived. And unbeknown to me, somebody the night before had poured water all over their car to defrost it. Water had gone all over the pavement. I walked across it, and even though I was in proper walking boots with a ski pole and everything else, as I walked across the black ice, my left ankle went inwards 90 degrees and shattered the sticky out bone, or the medial malleolus for the medics amongst us. And I got carted off to A&E, and I arrived at 5 to 11 in the morning. Knew the charge nurse, ward sister in charge, and she's like, "What you done to your leg, Elliott?" And I'm like, "Well, big box on my leg. You should know, you're a nurse, broken leg." And she's like, "Don't take the mickey. You're the 37th person this morning with a lower limb injury that we've had." It was insanely busy, and had a special cast called a back slab cast so that my leg could swell if it needed to. And then a week later, they operated on my leg, put a load of metal work in, and they reckoned within 4 months, I'd be back walking around, not a problem. That didn't happen. And then they gave me, some years fast forward, 2015, they gave me 4 injections in the outside of my ankle joint for steroids and everything that was supposed to sort it out. And unfortunately, one of the needles, probably the first one, scratched one of the nerves in my foot. Ooh. Caused a lump smaller than a millimeter in my foot. So tiny little lesion or lump. And that caused neuralgia in my foot. And I couldn't have a sock on. I couldn't have bedclothes over my foot, nothing. And if you touched my foot in a triangle from the middle toe back to the outside sticking out bone, roughly, as soon as you touched my foot, it was like I was getting electric shocks through my foot, and my foot would just snap out of its own accord. And the rest of my foot, if you ran your fingers over it, it felt to me like, I'm trying to way to describe it. It felt like the skin had been scalded, and the skin was really tight. And after that, there's no coming back from that. And I was referred from Watford Hospital to Nuffield Orthopaedic Centre, and they put a lot of effort into rehab, hydrotherapy, all that kind of stuff. And sadly, that didn't help. So other plans were made to remove all the metalwork. So, all that happened and that didn't help and everything else. And the list of things they could do to try and help was becoming shorter and shorter and shorter. And I was in bad pain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the surgeon and me had a very frank and open conversation. And it was then decided the only thing that they could do was to either leave it how it was or amputate, prosthetic leg, learn to walk, and hopefully have some quality of life.
That's got to be a horrible decision.
Yeah, it was a horrible decision to have to make, but because this had been going on for a number of years, and I'd seen the list of things they could do becoming shorter and shorter and shorter, I got to the stage where it was like months before it was even, the surgeon said, I'm putting you on the waiting list for an amputation, which is something you never really want to hear from the surgeon. I kind of knew that was the way it was heading. So although it was a really difficult decision to make, I was prepared for it. I kind of expected it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So that cushioned the blow, but it was really difficult. And I was in hospital because of complications for a month. And I was discharged on December the 19th.
Yeah.
And then within days ended up with an antibiotic resistant infection in the stump. Is there anything else that can go wrong? When I said nothing, is there anything else that could go wrong? I didn't think the universe would take that as a challenge. That's how I ended up being an amputee. And, I've had the whole of since November 2021. And then I decided for my 50th, rather than going and getting drunk and celebrating my 50th by getting drunk and not remembering much of the evening, I would do something else. And I hadn't quite made my mind up what else to do when I saw the advert in Facebook, which I think was the same advert you probably saw.
Yeah.
At the Abseiling. And I dropped an email off with my brief details. I'm Elliott, I'm nearly 50. I'm carrying a bit of extra weight, minus one leg. I want to do the Abseiling. And Sophie, one of the organisers from London's Air Ambulance, who's lovely. Hello, Sophie. She used to work at a charity with amputees. So was more than aware of all the issues that go on around being an amputee. So that made me a lot happier about going forward for it. So I went for it, raised just under 500 quid before the Abseiling. And then somebody else sponsored me 50 quid. So I was at like 547 quid, 114 quid on gift aid. So far, still not too late to sponsor me. And so I went for it. And I have carers to help me at home. And one of the carers, Helen, is an amazingly skilled carer and brilliant at what she does. We'd had a chat a few months earlier about doing the Abseiling. And she said, I'm not scared of heights. If you need somebody to come along and help you with the wheelchair and everything, let me know.
Oh, brilliant.
So I was like, and then the company decided to send somebody else in case they needed two people. So me and Helen went forward, had a brilliant tour of the helipad with Sophie. Thanks again, Sophie. And did the Abseiling. But because of, I'm very confident in the wheelchair and I'm pretty confident at trying stuff. But without having Helen's support on the day, I wouldn't have been able to manage doing the Abseiling, even with the LAA event staff. So, it's a big thanks to Helen. Thanks, Helen. And, I did it. And we had a fantastic tour of the helipad, and I did the Abseiling. And like anyone that's done more than a few Abseilings, the first 10 to 20 feet are the worst. And then you're like, I'm not imminently going to die. I can control the rope. Now I'll enjoy myself. So I did sort of about the first 40 feet. looking at the hospital, and a couple of people waved out the windows at me, which I thought was kind of sweet. And then I turned myself round on the rope to look out across London and sort of leant back a bit and then enjoyed the fantastic views of, from where I was. This is not a view that you're going to get, very often. And then turned round, and as I got near the bottom, the building is inset slightly. So I turned round to allow for that because I didn't want to swing backwards, be out of control. And then just as I got to the ground, Karen from Dolomite Events, I think it's called, she turned around and goes, "Elliott, you're going to have to turn around so we can put you in the chair just below you." I'm like, all I keep doing is turn around and facing different directions. And as I came into land, there was 20, maybe 30 people watching who were going down Millwalk Street and had obviously looked up going, "Oh, look, someone's abseiling." And then, "Oh, look, the crazy person abseiling's only got one leg." So they then stuck around, and quite a few people came up and were like, "You're so brave and so inspirational." And one lady was really over the top of the whole, "You're brave and inspirational and you've got one leg and you still did the abseil." And I'd had sort of half a dozen people before saying it, and it was starting to get very old. And I just turned and said, "Oh yeah, I'm 50, carrying a bit of extra weight, and I've got one leg, and I've just done the abseil. What's your excuse for next year?" "Oh yeah, I'll think about it." And that was that. So it's kind of like, well, if you're saying I'm brave and inspirational, can't I inspire you to take part next year? Because it was absolutely brilliant and really well organized. And anyone that's thinking of doing it, go for it.
Yeah, and as you know, and a lot of my friends, on my Facebook page, we know, I was meant to be doing it the day after you were, and obviously I've got a disability as well, and so it would be a big challenge for me as well. But unfortunately, you were doing it when we heard the news that the Queen was ill and then had passed away. So they've had to postpone my day and the following days until next year.
Yes, out of respect for Her Majesty. God bless her, rest in peace, Your Majesty, and all that. I literally got home and I was aching a lot, and it wasn't an easy journey home on the underground at all. And sort of sore. And I lay down on my bed and I was just sort of sifting through the photos when listening to Radio 4. And as you do. And Radio 4 suddenly went silent.
They all have to switch to a particular kind of programming system and things, don't they? And
the initial thing was complete silence. And I was laying in my bed, because I was in pain and everything else in my defense. And I was like, it just felt really, really weird. It was really eerie for a little while.
That must have been really, really confusing, I suppose, on the emotions and things, because on one hand, you're elated at finishing this amazing abseil. You're also coping with your body reacting and saying, what have you done? And then on top of that, you're hearing the news that we've lost the monarchy who's been around for all of our lives.
But it's like the other sort of surreal bit about it was that the background noise that I normally hear where I live, and it was more than the usual quiet. It was like you couldn't hear anything at all. And I'm like, that's really, really eerie.
You were saying, before we started filming, you were explaining to me that, you'd heard that the Queen was a big fan of the air ambulance.
Yes.
And also William, I think you said, was the
William's.
patron, didn't you?
I think I'm right. Please don't kill me if I'm not. William's the patron of London Air Ambulance. grandson of the Queen. But one of the sort of stories that's been doing the rounds for a number of years was that the Queen was taken off in a helicopter from the Special Forces area of Heathrow. Because obviously she doesn't just turn up at the desk and go, "Hello, I'm flying aboard," which is fine. And she was sat in this RAF helicopter about to take off to go wherever she was going. And the pilot had started the engine, and then London Air Ambulance needed to transit the Heathrow area of operation to get to some person in need. And as the story goes, the pilots had to stop the engine. Of course, the Queen's looked up, why is the engine stopping? And the pilot had the possibly awkward job of saying to the Queen, "Your Majesty, I'm really sorry, but we can't take off at the moment because London Air Ambulance needs to transit the Heathrow area of operations." And as the story goes, the Queen just looked at the pilot, didn't miss a beat, and just went, "Ew, there's lovely people at London Air Ambulance, can take as long as they want." Leaned across, picked up an ironed copy of the Times, snapped it out, and started reading it, which I thought was a completely lovely story. And
yeah, absolutely. And it shows that she recognises the importance of the emergency services. And
they've landed in a back garden in London Air Ambulance before, and they've landed in Pall Mall. And let's not forget that when she was a young woman, she volunteered to help with the war effort and was an ambulance driver and mechanic. And she could strip the spark plugs and everything else and sort the engine out if it wouldn't go. So she's gonna be, that's got to change you if it happens as a young person. And so she's kind of on the side of ambulances.
Yeah, and it means that she's kind of seen firsthand the how the different kind of services like that have to respond to things. And
just before we move on from the Queen, did you hear when the Saudi prince came over to the UK and there was a dinner at Windsor Castle in his honour, and he wanted to be shown round the grounds, and it'll be a Land Rover rather than a limo, but yes. And he got showed into this Land Rover and sat in the back of the Land Rover, and then realizes, it's a woman driver. And at the time, women weren't allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. And he's sort of uncomfortably, like, to his lackey, like, I'm not happy with the woman and all this. And the woman turned around as the Queen. And she took him round Windsor at quite a reasonable pace of speed. And all the way back, and then did the whole, stopping on the gravel skid. And just because she wanted to make the point that, women can drive.
Yeah.
Which I thought was, it would have been great if they'd had a GoPro fitted above the wing mirror or something. It would have made a fantastic bit of movie. But yeah, I mean, the Abseil 2022, I think, is always going to have the fact that the Queen passed away during the middle of it.
Yeah.
As being part of it, sadly. So, and they postponed, they've postponed it. We don't know when the rest of 2020 Abseil is going to happen.
Yeah, well,
So have to wait and see.
Yeah, I was meant to do it originally, a couple of years ago, and then COVID kind of stopped that the first time. The year after, they did put it on, so that was last year.
Yeah.
But they'd chosen to do some building work because it was
had to be done.
A good time to do it, and unfortunately that meant there was no kind of lift access and things. I'm not able to walk 17 flights of stairs. We haven't actually mentioned that the helipad's on top of the kind of the 17th story.
No, we haven't. Have you seen the helipad in person?
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. But
it's a wow factor. They take you out these big double doors that have got signs like, aircraft movement area, no unauthorized access and all this. And to get my wheelchair up there, we had to go up the ramps. The trauma patients will be brought down the ramps.
Mm.
And it just, like, with the base of it and everything else, it just looks amazing. It looks phenomenal up there. And
I guess, yeah, it might be 17 stories up, but it's hospital, isn't it? Which is generally a larger story. So but 284 feet, I think it is, isn't it?
The abseil was 284 feet, and I think it works out as 2 extra stories before you get to the helipad.
Okay, yeah.
But it's phenomenal. And while we're up there, myself and Helen, the very, helpful Helen that I mentioned earlier that I couldn't have done the abseil with, she was just looking around, chin on on the floor at how amazing it looked up there. And Sophie was like, if the klaxon goes for an emergency, don't panic, we'll tell you where to go. And I just pulled my phone and went, not a problem, I'll get you some publicity photos. Because that wouldn't worry me at all. I've done photography with other air ambulances and so on,
at
their takeoff and so on, and I'm more than happy around helicopters, aircraft and everything else. My only thing to double check would be that the force of wind coming out underneath it didn't blow me in the wheelchair off the helipad.
Yeah, that wouldn't be.
So I'd want a corner somewhere I can wedge myself in.
Yeah, but I think it's with the air ambulances, it's amazing that it's within 2 minutes they take off or something like that, isn't it?
It's phenomenal. But having
grabbing all their helmets and everything, running up the thing, and off they go.
Because like Helen pushed me up this big, long ramp, because obviously they can't have it too steep and everything else. Dancing on a stretcher, etc. And I was giving a little bit of a hand as I could, wheeling me up this ramp. And I'm like, can you imagine having to run up that ramp like half a dozen times a day to get to the aircraft?
Yeah.
It would have been nice if it had been a better day for it, but we still got to see amazing views and everything else. And I was talking to Sophie, and I was like, if I worked at the hospital, I would go up there for lunch every damn lunchtime because it would be phenomenal. And I was looking around when we were up there, see if I could spot any raptors or any aircraft, any birds or anything like that flying around the aircraft, because it would be a singularly unique view looking down on the birds. But it's amazing what they do. And phenomenal how within 2 minutes of the shout going out, they're in the aircraft and they're about to take off. And I will always admire the pilots for the tiny areas they land in to get as near as they can to the patient, so the doctors and paramedics can get to the patient as soon as possible.
They can land in junctions of roads, can't they?
They've done that loads of times.
If you kind of think about that, that's often just 2 lanes wide.
Yeah.
And T-junction, and that's big enough.
I think I'm right in saying, because it was for the old aircraft, who's now retired out in the Virgin Islands, I think, that it needed 90 square feet to land in, which is like tiny. And I do know that Neil, the chief pilot, Neil Jeffers, has landed numerous times between the 2 towers of Tower Bridge.
Wow.
And that's like, if you think about the pedestrian railings, that's a tiny area to try and land a big helicopter.
As in landing on the bridge.
Road between the 2 towers of Tower Bridge.
And it is just 2 lanes wide, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think. And also to land in that, you've got the big things either side. So that is a very
bench cables. And he was asked in an interview what the most difficult thing was about landing on Tower Bridge. And everyone's expecting, well, I had to get the nose here, the rotors on the suspension cables, all that kind of discussion. And he turned around and went, stupid pedestrians that won't get out of the way as we land, even though we've got the siren on.
Yeah.
And you're like, really?
Yeah, actually,
problem he has on
Yeah.
Tower Bridge.
let's mention that now. If you are ever in a situation where you see an air ambulance trying to land, or even
Move
a
out the
police
way.
helicopter or anything like that,
Move
move
right
out the way, try and get other people to move out of the way and create
Yeah.
plenty of space.
Mhm.
And then they can land, they can do their job, and then they can go again.
Yeah, because a helicopter the size of London Air Ambulance landing will blow you off your feet.
And they are going for a very specific reason, and because it is an absolute emergency.
Oh yeah, I mean CAA rules for air ambulances is that they can land anywhere they want, only in a medical emergency. So if they are trying to land on Tower Bridge, it's for a good reason. Move out the way.
Yeah.
Your Facebook post is not as important as saving a life.
Let it land, then take your photo with it.
But they have landed in incredibly small areas.
Yeah.
I think it was Yorkshire Air Ambulance was landing in an estate, and they went into land, aborted the landing, radioed the police on the ground to say, could you ask everyone to close their windows before we land?
Wow.
And the police were like, yeah, but, we don't know if we can get everyone to close their windows. And the pilot, in true, pilot fashion, was like, not a problem. If anyone doesn't close their windows, we'll close them for them.
Yeah.
That's the amount of force that comes out the bottom of the helicopter.
Yeah.
Really get out of the way
Mm.
at the end of the day. But no,
Yeah.
it still amazes me the tiny area that they can land on. And I've been following London Air Ambulance and things like that right the way back to sort of Cannon Street rail disaster and so on. And the area that the pilots put it into land just blows my mind.
Mm.
The tiniest of areas, and you're like, you couldn't park a white van in that area, could you? Well, you could park a helicopter. So yeah, but definitely worth mentioning. Just get out of the way.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go in any direction, walk away towards the front of the aircraft so the pilot can see you, because they don't have wing mirrors, and they won't necessarily see you if you're right by the tail end of the helicopter.
This is just a very quick interruption to thank you for watching. If you could like, subscribe, follow, that would just show your provider that you're enjoying the conversation and you would like to see more. If you're on YouTube, then there's a little notification bell that will let you know when I've got more coming up. And also you will find a link to Patreon down in the description. And even if you just want to support in a very tiny way, then there's that option as well. And thank you very much. Back to the chat.
Amazing.
Just quickly before we come to land, you obviously aren't able to do all the medic stuff these days. So
No.
what do you do?
I fell back on my computer knowledge, and I do a lot of web design, graphic design, and that sort of stuff. And I do a lot of proofreading and copywriting these days. But since my accident, even now, I'm furloughed a bit because I've got to get myself back to where I can walk about a bit and where I'm not getting savaged by phantom pains as often as I am.
Do you want to explain what phantom pain is?
Oh man, how to explain phantom pain in a couple of paragraphs. It's pain. It's often loads more than the typical pain that you'd get. But the biggest problem is it's in a limb that doesn't exist anymore. Like yesterday, I had a phantom pain that was in the muscle that would be behind my big toe, like the muscle that you would normally put down on the ground with your big toe, that muscle, the huge, big, chunky one. And it felt like that was being repeatedly hit by a hammer and so on. And I said to you earlier, I think, Steve, that one of the regular features is like my foot is being crushed.
Yeah.
But there's nothing I can do because the foot doesn't exist.
Yeah. And I suppose people can imagine what it would feel like to have maybe their foot crushed. But and most of us would look, see if we could do anything about that. But you're fully aware that your body's telling you that there's a pain in pain in your foot, which isn't there.
And another one I get a lot of is as if my little toe is being crushed in pliers, or the two middle toes have been gripped in pliers, and then someone's trying to rip my foot vertically down the length of the foot. Also had one that lots of people find fascinating, where it feels like, you know, those sandals that you wear on the beach?
Yeah.
Well, they've got like a bar that goes across your toe.
Oh, yeah.
You know, behind the toes, you know, rather than the Y-shaped plastic ones, the bar across your foot. Feels like I get a lot like that. I was wearing a really tight pair of those. But when I was in hospital at Nuffield, post-amputation, I was in for a month because of complications. I had that with the sandal. And one of the things that my physio had taught me to do to try and distract this was to move my leg backwards and forwards and so on. And I did that. And as I'd done it, I felt a stone by the muscle of my big toe and my phantom foot roll down the sandal and out past my heel.
That, I suppose it's one thing to kind of think, okay, yes, there's a pain in the foot, but to have such specific feelings and things, it's
weird. And I the other one that I had that was quite strange, well, no, it was very, very strange. I didn't sleep for about 3 days after my surgery unless I had a good dose of morphine, and you don't get proper sleep when you're on morphine. And I decided I was going to teach my brain that there was no leg there. So I got the stump very gently, because I just had surgery, put it on the bed, and then looked at the stump as if say, look, see, stupid brain, there's no leg there. Stop hurting. And then my brain decided within less than 15 seconds, well less than 15 seconds, that the only reason my leg was doing that was because there's a hole in the bed. And my brain made everything, even the pressure of the hole on the back of my calf, that didn't exist. And I was like, well, that plan didn't work, did it, Elliott? So I thought I'd try it again. And if I do it a few times, my brain's going to learn, right? And so I've done it 7 times. And every single time my brain was convinced that my foot was going through the bed. And it was making up, feeling the metal work, the hole, everything. And Lorraine, bless her, lovely nurse, who'd been an orthopedic nurse for 30 years, came in and was like, what the are you doing, Elliott? So I explained to her. She's like, well, what you need to do is lie down on your side with a pillow between, your legs to cushion the stump, and, count down from 100 and you'll go sleep. I won't, but I'll try. So I lay down with this pillow between, my good leg and the stump. And then my brain straight away is like, you can't lay there. There's holes all over the bed. There's no holes in the bed. But the phantom pain is so weird. It's just weird sensations. And it's not always horrifically awful pain that drives you mad. Sometimes it'll be the phantom itching, which is just as frustrating. But it's like, how do you scratch the bottom of your foot that doesn't exist?
Yeah.
There's no way of getting rid of the itching. And it's like, especially if it's sort of 2 in.the, like, just stop, there's no foot there. It doesn't itch. Leave me alone to go back to sleep. And you can't.
And I guess sometimes it's those silly little things that can be worse than
Mhm.
some of the others.
And one of the things I'm very aware of from being a member of the amputee group on Facebook, which I think was where we got in touch, wasn't it?
Now got in touch through
Yeah.
the air
It was
ambulance
through the air
page.
ambulance.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are groups, and there's a very good group, Friends of Amputees UK, on Facebook. And I see all the discussions in the group. One of the discussions that comes about is, do you miss the leg? And I had for months and months been like, no, never gone to stand on the leg that doesn't exist, never missed it, nothing. And then I started learning to walk, and to make it easier, I bought slip-on shoes. And the first time I used the slip-on shoes, when I went to take them off, I went to lean with my now missing foot to push the other shoe off.
Yeah.
And then my brain caught up, I was like, oh no, there's no leg. Can't do that. Oops. Which is one of the few times. But there was a guy in the amputee group who'd been an amputee for 5 years. And he got out of bed to go for a wee in the middle of the night, completely oblivious to the fact that he was an amputee, and went crashed down on his stump.
Mm.
And in his brain, he still had the leg there. And I've had some dreams that I remember. Don't worry, we're not making an adult discussion. I have some dreams that I can remember, and I wake up from. We all know those vivid dreams, right?
Mm.
And things like I've been dreaming that I still had Sheppy, my dog, and I wasn't living where I was living. I was living in the previous house, and all this. And I was dreaming that I still had Sheppy, and he was with me in the new flat. And where I was dreaming, I still dream as if I've got both my legs.
Yeah.
I haven't yet woken up from a vivid dream where I've woken up knowing that I'm an amputee.
I suppose you've had
Strange. It was just,
several
one of those weird
decades.
things that you notice.
Yeah, you've had several decades with two legs. So
Excuse me, I'm only 50 on the 20th. Thank you. Cheeky so.
But yeah, your brain's only had less than a year now to kind of say, hang on, that leg's not there.
Best part of 5 decades with two
Yeah.
legs, and the brain sometimes hasn't quite caught up with it.
Yeah.
But I've had one occasion where I've gone to get out of bed in a hurry to go to the loo and been oblivious to being an amputee.
Mm.
And what I do is I park my wheelchair and my desk chair up against my bed.
Yeah.
And the other side of the bed is by the radiator in the window. So there is no way I physically could get out of bed and then discover I'm missing a leg.
Yeah, if you roll out of bed, hit the wheelchair, that kind of thing.
I hit the wheelchair or I hit my desk chair.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter which. I just want to hit one of them rather than I roll out of bed and go, splat.
Yeah.
Being picked up off the floor by paramedics gets really boring really quickly, to be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I've done lots of falls when I had, weirdly, I had more falls when I had both my legs than I have done. Now I'm missing a leg. But I still
you've got your whole experience online, haven't you? And
yes.
So you've kind of gone into a lot of detail of so many falls that you had, which
loads of them.
And that, I suppose, made your leg a lot worse, didn't it?
It didn't help. See, I have one of these, what I refer to as my panic button, which I've had to use a couple of times. But yeah, I mean, I have talked online on my website about the whole journey from full to amputee on my website, elliottrodgers.com, if anyone's bored and wants to read it. And and there were lots of falls that didn't help, when I had two legs. But there's only one time I've rolled and been about to, put 2 feet down. And thankfully my hands found the wheelchair quick enough so I didn't go splat. But I have fallen in the bathroom and come round on the bathroom floor and been like, man, my whole floor looks really dirty from this angle. Hang on. by on the floor. Used the panic button and had to be picked up off the bathroom floor by paramedics,
Yeah.
which wasn't great. I've been there a little while. I'll leave the rest to your imagination. And it wasn't great.
I think it's important to say that your experiences with the whole kind of the leg, the problems there, that's very unusual, isn't it? And most people with that will make a good recovery.
Oh yeah, I mean, at 100%, it was just, I was incredibly unlucky. And when I was talking to the original surgeon at Nuffield, who sadly was ill, but when I was talking originally about it with the surgeon at Nuffield, he was an absolute out and out expert in his field at one of the best orthopedic hospitals in the country that trained other orthopedic consultants. And he said that in a bad year, he would do 3 or 4 surgeries on legs like mine that were down to pain rather than loss of function.
Yeah.
And when I'd done the original injury before it all got complicated, I was told 12 to 16 weeks recovery.
And so, I suppose that's standard, isn't it?
Yeah. I had an exceptionally bad fall on the ice that did damage that was worse than it normally would be. And then I was unlucky when they did the injections in the outside of my ankle. Does, less than 1% chance there was going to be a complication, and it happened to me. And that's where I am today. So it's not like everybody that breaks their ankle is going to have anywhere near the horrendous journey I did.
Yeah. And if it's 3 surgeries that they see like that in a year, compared to the number they do, they probably do several a day, don't they? So
I mean, this guy's doing, what did he say? The day that he was going to do it, because it was postponed, but the day they were going to do it in July, I think he said he had 14 on his list.
Wow. Okay.
In a day.
Yeah.
He's doing that like 5 days a week, and there's a team of 4 of them. So, it doesn't take a mathematician to go, these guys are doing an amazing
thousands a year, yeah.
And the tiniest of percent are down to because of out of control pain.
Yeah. And I suppose one of the important things here is to kind of say, even if it does get to that point, then,
there are ways of dealing with it.
Yeah. And we can see that you're making, okay, you might not be able to do a lot of the things that you could do before, but you are making good progress with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll be able to do a lot of things I've done before soon. And I did the abseil, and I didn't have my prosthetic leg at all. I'd done it without the prosthetic leg, so I had one leg, and I still managed to do the abseil, and I still managed to do a hell of a lot of things. And next year, I'm talking to a friend's charity who does work with Guatemalan street children, and I'm aiming on doing, the plan is to do London to Brighton walk over 3 or 4 days.
And
with
that's, what's that, 100 miles or something?
Yeah, that's the plan. 100 miles.
Well, that's, yeah.
It'll be done with a prosthetic leg, and it'll be done over 3 or 4 days. But, that's, if I'm prepared to do that, do anything.
Yeah.
Really.
And you were saying, I think you were telling me before your abseil, that you've only been able to use the prosthetic a few times so far, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right. I started learning to walk in April, but there were some delays because both me and my physio had been poorly. And it's literally 3 weeks since I brought it home. And I started practicing walking up and down at home and so on, which was a very weird sensation. So, I've not stood up in my own home on 2 legs since like October 2022. And it was a bit weird. And, I'd because the day I got it, was a low pain, was, you know, virtually no pain day, probably because of the adrenaline. But anyway, it was a no pain day. And I was stood in my lounge with a friend of mine that I'd known like 25 years. And I was like, this is the first time I've actually stood up in the flat I'm in over 3 years. So I've stood up on 2 legs with no pain.
Wow. Yeah.
And, you know, when I first stood in April, when I first got the prosthetic leg, and it was, you know, it was still very much trialing. It was the first time that I'd stood up pain-free since at least April 2012,
Yeah.
possibly since the actual accident, December 2010,
Yeah.
which is a bit mad, really.
Over
And
10 years. Yeah. That's,
yeah.
yeah.
But one thing to talk about, if we're going to talk about, you know, helping people and all that kind of thing, is some bits not to do when people are in wheelchairs.
Yes, definitely. I know one of them is not to just go and push it without asking.
Oh, pet hate of mine. The number of times people have come up behind you and pushed the wheelchair, and for somebody in a wheelchair, you're like, what the hell's happening? And I've had people push me across car parks and things like that, and you're like, please don't. Please ask. Unless a truck's about to run me over, don't. And I've had people in supermarkets that have taken hold of the handles of the wheelchair and pushed or pulled me out the way so they can get a product off the shelves.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm like, beep off. You're not doing that. You wouldn't just pick up a random granny and lift her out the way, would you? Well, no, because that'd be rude. So what makes you think it's okay to just take hold of a wheelchair and just pull it out the way?
Mm.
And my other pet hate in a wheelchair, don't know if you use a wheelchair or not,
No.
is slopes are a nightmare. Absolute nightmare. Anything higher than about 12 degrees, which is 6 inches high over 72 inches long, is a problem in a wheelchair.
I suppose everywhere has to try and make it accessible.
Well, of
And
course.
so everywhere kind of goes with the ramps. But there is a legal
oh yeah, the
legal recommendation for slope,
which is
isn't
6 inches and 6 inches high by 72 inches long.
Yeah.
But the problem comes is even if it's a really shallow slope, the minute that poor person takes their hands off the wheelchair, they're rolling backwards.
Mm.
And it's like, if you ever see especially me, if you ever see a person in a wheelchair and they're like near a slope, off from a push.
Mm.
And it's like, nearly everyone I know that's in a wheelchair won't be offended if, excuse me, do you want some help? And like, at the end of the day, don't be offended if they say no. But personally,
and with both of those points, I suppose, isn't it? Both of those points were saying, before you push somebody, ask. If they're struggling to go up a slope, ask.
Yeah. And the other one, on a really frustrating one, that I'm sure your viewers wouldn't do because they're all polite, lovely people, is talking over the person in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm some super clever guy, but I'm fairly intelligent. I'm fairly politically astute. I'm good at maths. I'm great at technology. So if someone's pushing me into a shop, don't assume that I'm completely stupid and you got to talk to the person pushing the wheelchair.
Yeah.
And that happened. I've had that happen in Barclays Bank, where they wouldn't talk to me about my own account, even though I said, it's my account. Here's my bank card. They wanted to talk to the person pushing me. And they're like, no, you need to talk to him. It's his bank account. I got no idea what's going on. And they wouldn't take the hint. So it really does happen.
Yeah. The question is like, would he like a drink or what would he want and things like that is,
And not parking over dropped curbs is a good one because they are essential for wheelchairs. You can't just roll a wheelchair straight over a curb.
Yeah.
It doesn't end well. Trust me, I've done it. You end up.
Yeah,
Superman
I
in
guess
the
if
wheelchair.
people are pushing push chairs,
Yep.
you're able to kind of get them up and over,
Yeah.
but it's not the same with a wheelchair, is it?
No. And I mean, I've had one of the front wheels of my wheelchair go over a curb in a car park, and I was Supermaned out the wheelchair, smashed down on my stump, then my body curled into the landing, broke 4 ribs on my left side, and if I hadn't have put both my arms in front of my face, I would have smashed my face into the curb.
Wow. Yeah.
So, you know, if people thought about that before they parked over drop curbs, that'd be great.
A drop curb being one that's actually sloped
One
down
that's
to give
slower.
a small slope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just, you know, if you're going to park on the pavement, please don't. But if you're going to park on the pavement, think about the fact you've got to leave enough room for a wheelchair to get through.
Mm.
Plus, whoever is doing the wheelchair, if they're by themselves, needs enough room for their elbows to move. Because you flap your elbows when you're doing the wheelchair a lot, or I do. And it might be that I've just got some really weird, unique way of doing it, but flapping the elbows. And it makes, you know, the number of times, I mean, I've done articles in the local paper about parking on the pavements, or somebody, you know, the crossings where you cross the road? With an island in the middle of the road. On the far side, she dumped half a dozen bags of rubbish on the pavement, which meant I couldn't get up the other side out the road. And I ended up tilting to one side. And every time I tried moving, I was tilting to one side. And I was literally in the wheelchair, like, in a minute, I'm going to be on my side, looking at the oncoming traffic, thinking, don't run my head over.
Yeah.
It was only because somebody from a local chemist saw what was going on and ran over and pushed me that I didn't end up in the road.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just something to be aware of.
And on the subject of parking, I qualify for a blue badge, which means that if somebody's driving me around, then we can park in the relevant spaces. The spaces are there, you know, often close to somewhere with a kind of a hatch line or something, isn't there, just to kind of give it a little bit of extra space as well.
Yes.
And the spaces are wider. It means that I can get out easier, but it's essential for the wheelchairs, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, on the same, you know, people have hidden disabilities. Got to mention that. And also
definitely.
exactly the same thing applies to disabled toilets. We need the handhold. You know, I've only got one leg. I need the handholds to get in and out of my wheelchair and on and off the toilet safely.
Yeah.
So, you know, think about that one. Now, I've sat there desperate for the loo, hoping I wasn't going to mess myself while somebody was using it as a changing room. You could have stood in the normal toilets and used it as a changing room without a problem.
Yeah. And with those as well, there's quite a few hidden disabilities that do affect the bowels and all that kind of process.
Crohn's,
and so
that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And so if they need to go,
they need to go.
They need to go. So that's it just means that people really need to be aware and
very aware.
Yeah. We've been chatting for quite a while now, and so I think it's probably a good time to finish off. So thank you very much, Elliott.
No problem at all. Thanks for everyone for listening.
We will put a link for your fundraising page, your website, so that people can go and read more and see more about that. We'll also put something for the London Air Ambulance.
Yes.
But if people are around the world elsewhere, then don't forget to support your local air ambulance.
But no, thanks for having me, Steve.
That's right. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that you managed to raise a lot of money for the air ambulance, and also your walking practice goes well, so that you can do your London to Brighton walk.
Right, absolutely. Thanks again for having me, Steve.
So thank you. This was Chatting with Interesting People. Today we were chatting with Elliott. Thank you very much, and see you again soon.